Sheremetyevo Airport, Moscow. June 12, 1979. A hijacked Pan Am Boeing 727 sits alone on a Soviet tarmac under floodlights, surrounded by snow-dusted concrete and KGB eyes. 89 Americans are trapped inside with militants who claim they've rigged the cabin to blow. Then a maintenance cart rolls up carrying 4 men in Aeroflot coveralls, a fuel testing kit, and a clipboard stamped FCU CONTAMINATION. But the tools aren't for engines. They're hiding something made to end a crisis in 12 seconds. Because if the Soviets step in, someone starts a war, so the CIA moves first. Operation Cold Wrench. June 1979 is a year where every misunderstanding can become a headline, and every headline can become policy. The United States and the Soviet Union are locked in a Cold War that runs on paranoia, ego, and public optics. SALT II negotiations are grinding forward in Vienna. The Shah of Iran has just fled into exile. Afghanistan is 6 months from Soviet invasion. Moscow is not just a city. It's a denied environment, a place where every hotel hallway and every taxi ride might be watched, where Western intelligence officers operate like submarines. Quiet, compartmented, always one wrong move from surfacing in disaster. The CIA's Moscow station in 1979 consists of approximately 20 declared personnel working under diplomatic cover at the American Embassy. But buried within that structure are 4 Special Activities Division operators who don't appear on any diplomatic roster. Their cover identities are deep, constructed over months, layered with documentation that survives KGB scrutiny. One poses as a trade liaison, another as a cultural attaché. The 3rd and 4th operate through a private logistics firm that services Western journalists. They are not there to collect intelligence. They are there for contingencies no one expects to activate. Then comes the hijacking. Pan Am Flight 438 departs Frankfurt at 0800 hours on June 11th, bound for Tehran with 89 passengers and crew. Somewhere over Eastern Europe, 4 men stand up. Pro-Palestinian militants affiliated with a splinter faction that Western intelligence has tracked for 18 months. They are armed with pistols that cleared security through a method still being investigated. Their demand is simple and impossible. Release imprisoned operatives from U.S. custody, or the aircraft becomes a fireball. The pilot is forced to divert. Sheremetyevo Airport is not a random choice. It's a statement. Moscow represents neutral ground in the twisted logic of hijacking. A place where American commandos cannot simply storm an aircraft, where diplomatic pressure cuts both ways, where the theater of the event matters as much as the outcome. The Boeing 727 touches down at 14:23 hours local time. Soviet air traffic control directs it to a remote stand, far from passenger terminals, surrounded by open tarmac that offers no cover for approach. Negotiations begin immediately. The Soviet Ministry of Foreign Affairs makes its position clear through back channels. This is an American problem that happens to be on Soviet soil. Moscow will not assault the aircraft. Moscow will not allow American military forces on Soviet territory. But Moscow also will not tolerate a burning American airliner on Soviet television, broadcast to a world that watches superpower competence like a blood sport. The message is contradictory by design. It creates a gap between what is forbidden and what might be ignored. For 23 hours, diplomats talk. The hijackers issue deadlines that pass without consequence. Fatigue becomes a weapon that cuts both directions. Passengers sit rigid in their seats, forbidden to move. The cabin temperature climbs, then drops as fuel burns and auxiliary power cycles. Inside the embassy, the CIA station chief sends an encrypted cable to Langley. Negotiations are degrading. Militants are becoming erratic. The Soviets want this resolved, but cannot be seen resolving it. The doctrine that governs what happens next has no official name, but practitioners call it cover for action. The logic is straightforward. In denied territory, you cannot import a rescue team. You cannot stage equipment. You cannot negotiate forever. The only approach left is to exploit an identity the enemy must accept. In this case, that identity is invisible. Airport maintenance. The men who touch aircraft without asking permission because their work is routine, necessary, and too boring to scrutinize. The obstacles stack immediately. First, KGB controls the perimeter. Every vehicle approaching the aircraft is logged, every person identified, every movement tracked by officers who are competent, paranoid, and operating under orders to prevent precisely what the Americans are planning. Second, the hijackers claim they've rigged explosives inside the cabin. Whether this is true or theater doesn't matter. The operational constraint is the same. Any assault must neutralize all threats before a detonator is triggered. Third, there is no second chance. If the assault fails, the United States owns a massacre on Soviet soil. The diplomatic cost would be incalculable. The human cost would be immediate. But planners identify a vulnerability. Soviet bureaucracy loves technical justifications. A mechanical problem is not a political problem. A fuel contamination report is not an authorization to intervene. It is paperwork. And paperwork, if confident enough, if specific enough, can override fear. By June 12th at 2000 hours, the plan is authorized. 4 operators will approach the aircraft disguised as Aeroflot maintenance personnel, conducting a mandatory fuel system inspection. They will board. They will assess. And if the militants allow proximity, they will execute. During the final briefing, one of the operators asks a question that never makes it into official records. The question is simple. What happens if the Soviets realize what we are? The answer is equally simple. We become the incident. The operator nods. He does not ask again. Handlers would later describe this moment as an example of operational compartmentalization, the psychological discipline required to act when consequences are unthinkable. But in that room, in that moment, it is simpler than doctrine. It is 4 men understanding they are about to walk onto a KGB-controlled airfield carrying weapons that, if discovered, will start a crisis they cannot stop. The human element of this operation is not heroism. It is something colder. One of the operators, a man who has been undercover in Moscow for 14 months, experiences what tradecraft manuals call legend drift. His cover identity feels more real than his original name. He thinks in Russian before English. He dreams in his false biography. During the equipment check, as he disassembles a suppressed pistol and nests it inside a toolbox, he catches himself worrying about a maintenance log entry that doesn't exist. For a supervisor who isn't real, in a bureaucracy he serves only as camouflage. In the post-operation psychological debrief, assessors will note this as a warning sign of prolonged undercover stress. But the mission continues. There is no replacement. There is only the operation. Intelligence intercepts from June 11th reveal one of the hijackers discussing his daughter during a forced radio communication with ground control. The man's voice is calm. He mentions her upcoming birthday. He describes a gift he promised to bring from Tehran. Analysts note nothing operationally relevant in the exchange. The detail is filed and forgotten. When the assault occurs 18 hours later, this man will be the first target engaged. His daughter will learn of his death through a news report that describes her father as a terrorist neutralized during a security operation. The gift, whatever it was, will never be delivered. By June 12th at 2200 hours, the operation enters its execution phase. The trigger is simple. Negotiations stall. The lead hijacker issues a new deadline with visible agitation, and a KGB liaison officer quietly informs the American embassy that Soviet patience is exhausted. The window is 90 minutes. After that, Moscow will take unspecified action. The unspoken calculation is clear. Better the Americans resolve this and bear the consequences than the Soviets act and own the outcome. The cover identity is engineered to be invisible through boredom. Aeroflot maintenance in 1979 is a sprawling bureaucracy of men in grease-stained coveralls who service aircraft with Soviet efficiency. Slowly, methodically, and without enthusiasm. The team acquires authentic Aeroflot maintenance uniforms through a black market contact cultivated over 6 months. The coveralls are not costume pieces. They are real, worn, faded, stained with hydraulic fluid and jet fuel. The caps carry the faint outline of sweat stains. The boots are scuffed. Every detail is calibrated to pass a glance from someone who knows what maintenance crews actually look like. The credentials are forgeries, but they are perfect forgeries. Sheremetyevo Airport maintenance badges are laminated cards with a specific hologram pattern introduced in 1978. The CIA's Technical Services Division has acquired the hologram press through a Scandinavian intermediary. The badges list fictional names, attached to real employee numbers harvested from surveillance of shift change rosters. Each badge includes a magnetic strip that, if checked, will return valid authentication. The system works because Soviet security assumes credentials that look correct and scanned correctly must be correct. The story they will tell is equally precise. FCU contamination, fuel control unit contamination. A phrase that sounds technical because it is technical. It implies urgency without drama. Contaminated fuel means grounded aircraft, investigation reports, paperwork that touches multiple departments. The phrase is designed to override hesitation. If your fuel is compromised, you don't leave this runway. And if you don't leave this runway, someone above my clearance level wants answers. The equipment cart is real. It is a standard Aeroflot maintenance cart, the wheeled platform used for ground servicing. On top sits a fuel sampling bottle, a hydrometer for measuring fuel density, a clipboard with fabricated log entries dating back 2 weeks, and a canvas toolkit stamped with Cyrillic lettering. Inside the toolkit, beneath a shallow tray of legitimate tools, are 4 suppressed pistols. The suppressor design is a CIA variant of the high-standard HDM. A .22 caliber pistol favored for close quarters work because it is quiet, controllable, and lethal at contact distance. Each weapon is disassembled. Slide separated from frame, magazine isolated, suppressor wrapped in an oilcloth. To anyone glancing into the toolkit, it looks like spare parts, springs, and metal stock. Only someone who knows what they are looking for would recognize the components. The team structure is built for violence in a confined space. Operator 1 is the lead. He will talk, board first, control the door, and establish the permission structure that allows the others to follow. He is fluent in Russian with a Moscow accent. His legend is the deepest. 16 months of operational history, traceable through forged documents back to a technical school in Leningrad. Operator 2 handles the right side engagement angle. His role is to close distance on the nearest hijacker the moment proximity is achieved. Operator 3 takes the left side angle, watching for hand movements, detonator cues, any indication of explosive triggering. Operator 4 blocks the rear of the aircraft, preventing a hostage stampede that could mask militants' movements or trigger panic-driven casualties. They conduct final equipment checks at 2240 hours inside a maintenance hangar 2 kilometers from the aircraft. Each operator assembles his weapon in under 8 seconds. The muscle memory is absolute. Slide onto frame, magazine seated, suppressor threaded, function check, disassemble in reverse order, return to toolbox. The process is repeated twice. No conversation. The only sound is metal on metal and breathing. At 2250 hours, the cart rolls. The approach is timed to exploit shift change at the KGB perimeter. For 12 minutes, security officers are focused on handover protocols, comparing notes, transferring observation logs. The team moves during this window, pushing the cart across open tarmac at a pace that suggests routine, not urgency. The distance from the hangar to the aircraft is 400 meters. The cart has a broken wheel that causes it to pull left. This detail is not planned. It is simply true. Operator 1 compensates without thinking. The imperfection makes them real. The first complication arrives at 2256 hours. A KGB officer steps into their path 30 meters from the aircraft. He is young, alert, carrying a radio. He demands paperwork. The documentation they carry is sufficient for airfield access, but not specific to this aircraft, this task, this moment. Operator 1 responds in Russian, his tone flat, bureaucratic, faintly irritated. He names a fictional maintenance supervisor, Dmitry Volkov, shift lead for Sector 7. He references a stand number, Echo 12. He points to the contamination note on the clipboard, as if it has already been approved by someone the KGB officer should know better than to question. The lie works because it is delivered with the confidence of a man who has filled out this form 100 times and resents being stopped now. The officer hesitates. Hesitation is permission. He steps aside. The cart continues. The second complication is visible through the cockpit windows. The hijackers can see them approaching. If the militants refuse entry, the entire operation collapses. There is no fallback plan. The team cannot force their way onto a Soviet aircraft on a Soviet airfield without triggering the diplomatic catastrophe the operation is designed to prevent. They must be allowed aboard. The approach relies on a calculation. Hijackers in hour 23 of a standoff are exhausted, paranoid, but also desperate for any change in status. Maintenance personnel are not negotiators. They are not threats. They are a distraction. At 2300 hours, Operator 1 reaches the forward boarding door and knocks. 3 sharp raps. The sound is loud enough to be heard over the auxiliary power unit. He waits. 10 seconds. 20. Then a voice from inside, shouting in accented English, "What do you want?" Operator 1 responds in Russian, then English, his tone clinical. "Fuel. System inspection. Mandatory before departure clearance. If your fuel is compromised, you don't leave this runway." The logic is weaponized bureaucracy. The hijackers want to leave. Leaving requires clearance. Clearance requires inspection. The door opens. Boarding begins at 2302 hours. The cabin is compressed, fear. 89 hostages sit in rigid silence. 3 hijackers are visible. 1 near the cockpit bulkhead, 1 mid-cabin, 1 at the rear galley. The 4th is somewhere forward, out of immediate sight. The operators spread naturally, like technicians inspecting a problem. Operator 1 moves toward the cockpit, clipboard up, speaking in calm technical phrases. Fuel pressure readings, contamination markers, valve integrity. Operator 2 angles right, toward the mid-cabin hijacker, his toolkit in one hand, the other free. Operator 3 moves left, scanning for the 4th militant. Operator 4 remains at the entry door, blocking the choke point. The hijackers allow proximity because they expect mechanics, not operators. This is the vulnerability. In the psychology of hijacking, threats are obvious. Armed men, sudden movement, commands. Maintenance personnel are beneath notice. They are set dressing. The militants watch their hands, but not closely. They watch their tools, but not specifically. The distance closes to 3 meters, then 2. The tradecraft moment is silent and small. Operator 2 wipes grease from his cuff onto his coverall, a mechanic's habit, a gesture repeated 1,000 times in 1,000 hangars. It is also the signal. The assault compresses into 12 seconds of controlled movement. 4 hands reach into 4 toolboxes. 4 weapons are assembled in motion, slide onto frame, magazine seated. The suppressors are already attached, threaded during the final seconds of approach while the operators crouch to inspect imaginary valve assemblies. The sound of the first shot is a mechanical snap, like a stapler closing on heavy paper. The lead hijacker, the man who spoke of his daughter 18 hours earlier, is engaged first. Operator 2 fires from 2 meters, a double tap to the center mass, and the man drops into the seat beside him. The detonator he is holding falls to the floor. It is a cylindrical device with a button on top and wires trailing to a canvas bag under the seat. Whether it is real or a prop will never be determined with certainty because no one examines it closely. The priority is securing the cabin, not investigating explosives. The second hijacker reacts faster. He reaches for his weapon, a pistol tucked into his waistband. Operator 3 engages from 4 meters, a single shot that strikes high, and the man staggers backward into the galley bulkhead. A second shot. He collapses. Elapsed time, 4 seconds. The third hijacker begins to raise his hands, either in surrender or to trigger something hidden. Operator 1 fires twice. The man falls across the armrest of a center row seat. A passenger screams. Then silence. The fourth hijacker is located in the cockpit. Operator 1 moves forward, weapon raised, and finds the man standing behind the pilot's seat, holding a knife to the co-pilot's throat. The distance is 2 meters. Operator 1 fires once. The shot is precise. The hijacker releases the knife and falls backward into the cockpit instrumentation. The co-pilot does not move. He stares forward, breathing in shallow bursts, his hands still on the controls. Total time from signal to final engagement, 12 seconds. No hostages are struck. The operators maintain muzzle discipline, their angles calculated to keep rounds away from seated passengers, their movements calibrated to prevent crossfire. The most dangerous moment is not the shooting. It is the half-second after, when 89 people realize what has happened and panic becomes a physical force. Operator 4 steps into the aisle and raises his voice in English. Remain seated, remain calm, you are safe. The tone is command, not request. It works. By 2315 hours, the forward door opens again. Not for negotiation, for extraction. Soviet security vehicles approach the aircraft. KGB officers board without announcement. The 4 operators are escorted off the tarmac, their maintenance coveralls stripped, their weapons confiscated. The hostages are moved within 30 minutes. Off the aircraft, into a terminal building, then onto buses bound for a secure facility where they will be debriefed, examined, and eventually released. The bodies of the hijackers are removed under plastic sheeting. The Boeing 727 remains on the stand for 72 hours, while Soviet investigators catalog every detail, looking for evidence of how 4 mechanics became an assault team. By 0600 hours on June 13th, Soviet authorities understand the operation that occurred on their soil. The evidence is overwhelming. Suppressed pistols of American manufacture, maintenance credentials that scan correctly but trace to employees who don't exist, and 4 men who speak Russian fluently but refuse to speak at all once detained. The KGB's Counterintelligence Directorate launches an immediate investigation, pulling surveillance logs, cross-referencing entry records, interviewing airport personnel. Every lead ends in dead ends, forged paperwork, and identities that dissolve under scrutiny. The sophistication level suggests state-level tradecraft. But transparency isn't the point. The Soviet government issues a carefully worded statement on June 14th. It describes a security incident involving militants who seized an American aircraft and were neutralized by Soviet authorities after negotiations failed. The statement does not mention maintenance personnel. It does not mention the CIA. It does not mention the 12-second assault. American officials respond with cautious relief. They thank the Soviet government for its cooperation and professionalism in resolving a dangerous situation. They do not provide operational details. The narrative holds because both sides need it to hold. For the hostages, the truth is obvious. They watched mechanics assemble weapons. They watched precision violence executed by men who moved like soldiers, not technicians. Several passengers give interviews describing the rescue in detail. The media reports the story. Intelligence analysts read between the lines. But official denials are maintained. The operation becomes one of those events where everyone knows what happened, but no one in authority confirms it. The tactical achievement is clean. 89 lives saved, 4 militants neutralized, 0 hostage casualties. The strategic cost is immediate and invisible. The CIA's Moscow station is compromised. The KGB now knows that American operatives with deep cover identities are embedded in the city, capable of acquiring Soviet credentials, accessing restricted areas, and conducting direct action on Russian soil. Counterintelligence operations intensify. Surveillance increases. Access routes are burned. 3 months after Operation Cold Wrench, 2 of the 4 operators are quietly extracted from Moscow. Their covers are no longer viable. The remaining 2 are reassigned to administrative roles. Their field careers effectively ended. For the Soviet Union, the outcome is equally calculated. The crisis leaves Soviet soil without a televised Soviet failure. No burning aircraft on the evening news. No hostages executed on Moscow concrete. The propaganda value is salvaged. Soviet authorities resolved a Western problem with professionalism and restraint. The fact that American operatives conducted the actual assault is known but unspoken. Both superpowers achieve plausible deniability. Both pay in currency that never appears in official budgets. The tradecraft lesson echoes through intelligence communities on both sides of the Cold War. Cover can be the weapon. In high-control environments, you don't beat security by overwhelming force. You beat it by becoming something security must let through. The Operation Cold Wrench model is studied, refined, and deployed in variations over the following decade. Maintenance personnel, medical teams, technical inspectors. The principle remains. Authority granted through mundane necessity is authority that can be exploited for seconds long enough to act. For the families of the hijackers, the consequences are personal and permanent. 3 of the 4 men are identified through fingerprints and Interpol records. Their bodies are eventually returned to their countries of origin. Funerals are held. Relatives speak of sons and brothers who believe they were fighting for a cause. Western intelligence files note that 2 of the hijackers had no prior operational history, suggesting they were recruited specifically for this mission. The 4th hijacker is never positively identified. Soviet records list him as unknown. His body is buried in an unmarked grave outside Moscow. One of the American passengers, a businessman from Ohio, writes a letter to the CIA 6 months after the operation. He does not mail it. He keeps it in a drawer. The letter describes the moment he realized the mechanics were not mechanics, the relief that followed, and the question that haunts him. What if the hijackers had been faster? What if the detonator had been real? He never learns the answer. The CIA never responds because the letter never arrives. But the question itself is the operational reality. Every hostage rescue is a gamble that violence can be applied faster than violence can be returned. Cold Wrench succeeded because 12 seconds was enough. The margin was thin. Was this operation a clean rescue or an execution on foreign soil? From one angle, it's a straightforward calculation. 4 militants neutralized to save 89 innocents under a clock that diplomacy couldn't slow. The operators acted within a doctrine that prioritizes hostage life over due process when time and access are gone. They used deception to bypass sovereignty, killed without trial, and left before consequences could attach. From another angle, it's a violation of every principle that governs lawful action. No legal authority, no judicial review, no accountability beyond internal assessment. The Soviet Union was an adversary, but it was not a battlefield. The hijackers were armed, but they were also trapped, surrounded, and possibly manageable through negotiation, given more time. The answer reveals more about your worldview than about the operation. If you believe that outcomes justify methods when the stakes are human lives, then Cold Wrench is a success. If you believe that sovereignty and due process are principles that cannot be suspended even in crisis, then Cold Wrench is a crime made convenient by circumstance and accepted because no one wants to challenge it. What's your take? If you could save 89 hostages only by disguising your way into another superpower's airport and killing the hijackers on the spot, would you call that heroism or a line you never cross? Drop your perspective in the comments. If this story made you reconsider what intelligence work actually costs when it works, hit that like button and share. Because the truth about operations like Cold Wrench is that they succeed in the moment and haunt everyone involved for years after. The hostages go home, the operators carry the weight, and history records a sanitized version that protects everyone except the truth.